Hello. You driving?
Hello.
You headed home?
Headed to Spearfish now.
Oh.
My other child.
Oh.
I have my 30-year class reunion in Belfouche, so I'm headed that direction.
Oh, well, that's fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
How big was your class?
72, and we meet every 5 years, and we're all pretty close. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
It'll be a good time.
Yeah.
It's been a long route.
Yeah. Oh. Because you're in Cheyenne, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I have daughters in Cheyenne and in Scottsbluff.
Okay.
And so my younger children spend time with their sisters in Scottsbluff.
I need to look to see if you can find my mute. So I'm not.
We just went to Spearfish a couple weekends ago. That was the first time we've been there. So pretty.
Oh, yeah? It is a pretty. It's where I went to college and stuff. So.
Oh, yeah.
Belfouche is only 10 minutes away. So, yeah, I grew up there too.
Yeah. Lucky.
Do you have family there? Or?
No, we just did a little vacation.
Nice. Very nice.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Well, got the dog and the kid and the other watching Frozen.
Life is good.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Misty. I didn't get to tell you hi. Saw you pop on.
Hi, sorry. I had you muted because I'm in a restaurant.
Oh, gosh, that's dedication.
Sorry, my daughter's telling me to talk quieter. So I will be listening. If you have a direct question, that's good, but otherwise I'll be listening.
Okay.
I can't see. I feel like she's talking. I can't hear.
Oh, it's not really fun location. So we always share locations.
Right.
Did no one get it? Oh, it's fine.
Hi, Tara. I didn't see you pop on.
Hello. Oh.
Both thinking yellow today, Heather.
It was the first thing I saw this morning. Trying to get out of the house so I can go to school and work.
Yeah.
I love teething.
Oh. It's pretty content right now.
She's super tired and hasn't had a nap yet by choice.
Oh. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Just checking.
So we need 4 more. There was one that maybe couldn't make it today.
I think that's the word that Noah might be good at. It's like
Here, I'll show you where I'm at. You can see the background.
Wow,
yeah.
that looks nice.
Is it like a soft touch word?
Is it cool by the water?
No, it's still really hot, but it's beautiful. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Andrea.
Hello.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Let's see, we're gonna have one more popping on. So are a lot of you starting ESY summer school stuff next week?
On Monday,
Monday, face-to-face?
face-to-face.
Yeah.
Although I did have one of my students request to remain on Zoom.
Oh. Yeah.
So that, yeah.
Twice the work for
I
you
was,
then.
yeah, I was surprised, but
Yeah.
I guess if that works.
Yeah. We'll get something.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna wait one more minute. I think who's. Trying to think who's missing. Krista and. All right, so everybody's starting to feel a little more comfortable with those assessments, administering those and all the
It was
ins
much
and outs.
easier the second time around.
Good.
Yeah.
Just wait till you get like the 50th time around. You can do it in your sleep.
I hope to avoid that.
Must be one part of the co-op, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, it gets easier each time. I interrupted somebody, sorry. All right. Well, today we're going to look at some documents and kind of analyzing the data and how do we put it all together. So the first section, we're just looking at some behavior data and some intelligence data, and I think there might have been some adaptive behavior in there too. And then, so that was today's session. And then the session for Monday was taking the whole eval and how do we kind of make sense of all that data together. You know, kind of how we talked about in those forums, like the numbers are the numbers, but they don't tell us a whole lot. We got to kind of look at those numbers and see what they mean and do those error analysis. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And Terry, I'll try to talk it out so you don't have to be distracted driving.
Thank you.
Woo. All right, so first we have here some behavior assessment, and it's kind of that ABC data. So what was the antecedent is the A, B is the behavior observed, and then C was the consequence that the student received in relation to that behavior. So we'll kind of read through this together so we can help Terry out. The first antecedent was the teacher instructs the class to get ready for math. Jessica asks irrelevant question regarding the field trip on Thursday. The consequence was the teacher responds that they're going on the trip on Thursday. Okay, so look for patterns as we're reading through this. Okay, the next antecedent, Jessica is told to look in her desk for her math book. Behavior, Jessica throws a pencil on the floor, then picks it up. Consequence, teacher tells Jessica to get to work. Next antecedent, teacher tells Jessica to get to work. Behavior, Jessica crumples up her paper and throws it and her book on the floor. And the consequence, teacher tells Jessica to go to the office. Okay, now because the teacher told Jessica to go to the office, she smiles and leaves. And what do we think? Do you think her behavior, the consequence was to escape the situation or to gain attention? Kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's kind of what our goal here. Okay, then the next day, the antecedent, the teacher instructs the class to get their math books out. Behavior, Jessica gets up to sharpen her pencil. Consequence, teacher asks Jessica a question regarding classroom procedure. When she asks about the classroom procedure, Jessica does not respond. Then the teacher informs Jessica of the procedure, tells her to get her math book out and check her homework. When the teacher asks her to do that, Jessica slams the book on the desk and groans. The teacher ignores Jessica. The teacher tells Jessica to open her book again, and then Jessica throws her book on the floor. The teacher tells Jessica to go to the office. And when she tells her to go to the office, she smiles and leaves. So, what do you think the function of Jessica's behavior? When we're kind of looking, is she escaping the situation or is she seeking attention? What would you think?
Escape.
Okay. Why do you think escape?
She's intentionally throwing her book on the floor and she knows that's the final straw the teacher will take.
It's math both times, and it's at the same point of getting time to get to work.
Yeah, good observations. Yep, I would agree with you. I think she's trying to avoid the work. You know, there's some things in there that you wonder about attention, like when she smiles, makes a lot of noise, but I think ultimately she's probably trying to escape the situation. What would be some possible ways we could intervene to help Jessica? So we know the function is she wants to escape. We'll just say we've determined that. So now our job is to figure out how she can still escape, but make it appropriate. So she's not being sent to the office.
Well, what's her reason for the escape? You know, is it because she doesn't know the content? Or is it a conflict with personalities with the teacher? You know, what's driving her behavior?
Yep, that's good to know. It might take us a little more.
Yeah, I would definitely meet with the student and ask, you know, like she said, what the issue is with math from her perspective, and then try to find, problem solve how we can make that better the next day, and maybe plan teach transitions. You know, earlier in the day, talk about, hey, when math starts, and I ask you to open up your book, you're just going to say okay and do it.
Good, yeah, prepare them before it happens. It's a good strategy. Sometimes with escape, I like to teach students to request a break. So that, you know, that's getting them out of the situation, but then momentarily, that they kind of have that control, but then they need to come back. So sometimes the coming back part is difficult to teach, but hopefully if they're getting that motivation along with, you know, like you said, Heather, finding where the problem is and then talking to the student, then hopefully you could work in baby steps.
Too. I was using just a stand timer, so they'd have 3 minutes to go and have a scheduled break or a requested break, and then they would do that calming strategy for those minutes, and then they'd have a sheet to finish or whatever they were working on, and then they could join the class again.
Another good idea. Must be at the movies, Erin.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my daughter's dad to come and take her to a movie. Sorry.
Hi, Josephine. Okay, let's move on to our next piece. Here's another way we can look at behavior data.
You could do a practice session with just the child at a different time and do a practice reteach until she's comfortable and she knows what to do.
Yeah, yep. That's good. Either, you know, if they're in the general classroom, if you're pulling them to the side, or if you're, you know, or in the resource room, or you can pull them a little when you have a moment. All right, so now we have some standardized behavior assessment information. This is the BASC, and it's kind of tiny. Hope you can kind of see it. So in general, when I do my reports, I put 3 stars next to the scores that are clinically significant, so very significant. And then the 2 stars are next to the score that's kind of in the at-risk range that we need to kind of start paying attention to, but not to that highest level yet. And then no stars means it's within normal limits. So when we kind of visually look at this student's profile, we see lots of stars. So we know that behavior is a concern. We'll also kind of look across. So first column is parent, and the next 2 columns are 2 different teachers. Do we see matches? What categories do you see that there's concern with the behavior, maybe at that same heightened level of concern? What areas do you see where the raters match? I'll show you the first one. We're going to kind of look in this clinical scale first, and let's see if I can get all the adaptive in there too. There we go. So first I see aggression. We have a 98, a 99, and a 91. So all 3 raters had this student in that clinically significant range where aggression, whether that be verbal or physical, that's Siri talking to me, that they are in that clinically significant range. So what else do we see?
Conduct problems and depression.
Yes, those are all also at that clinically significant level. So conduct problems is being those rule-breaking behaviors. Depression, you know, sometimes in young children that depression can come out to be a little bit more aggressive.
Adaptability and not being able to adapt to those different situations. Maybe practice some code switching.
Yep. Then we have that functional communications in that mild range, but the same across all graders. So being able to communicate their needs is tough. And then social skills, you see, is a major concern across all 3 raters. And then leadership, you know, working in a group, taking that leadership position, that's a mild concern, as well as study skills, since that's just rated in the classroom, not for home. So a lot of things going on here. What conclusions could you make about this student from this data? Not knowing any details, could you kind of come up with what is maybe happening with this student? Or what interventions you might suggest?
Maybe a check in, check out. Sorry.
You're good. Yeah, check in, check out, social skills group.
Yeah, I love that check in, check out strategy. Is everyone familiar with that? No, okay. I think I saw maybe one I have to scroll through you all when I have my screen up. So I can't see all your heads shaking or not shaking. But check-in, check-out is kind of a strategy where a student would check in with like an older peer mentor or a teacher, like right away in the morning. And that way you can kind of pre-talk about what is going to happen to the day. You might look at the schedule. You might make sure they have their materials. You might talk about if they have a behavior plan, like, okay, today you're really going to work on listening to the direction, saying, okay, and following through. You know, just giving them a little pep talk and reminders of what to look at throughout the day. And then the same thing happens at the end of the day or periodically throughout the day. Then you're going to go back to that mentor and check in and see how it's going and talk about, you know, what went well, what didn't go as well, and how you can work to help change some of those behaviors. That's kind of just a brief overview. So yeah, check in, check out would be good. As far as eligibility, when we look at a lot of these behaviors the student has, you see a lot of those outward types of behaviors like aggression, the conduct problems. When we look at that category of emotional disturbance, it kind of excludes those outward behaviors. I'm thinking of like oppositional defiance. Sometimes that doesn't really fall under emotional disturbance because you need to look at more of those internal types of behaviors. The one area we do have here is that area of depression. That would fall within that emotional disturbance because we'd have 2 standard deviations above the mean across 2 settings, 3 raters. We also look at those social skills too. It's affecting their social skills. We're seeing some, you know, hyperactivity, so maybe some impulse things. Maybe the student has a diagnosis of ADHD. Maybe they, and then obviously this is telling us that, you know, as far as attention, whatever strategies are kind of working, but still having trouble with that hyperactivity, impulsivity is what is currently happening. Anything else that comes to mind looking at this data? All right, let's move on to that intelligence. I don't know if a lot of you in your meetings kind of follow the same order. A lot of my meetings, depending on people's schedules, if someone needs to give their results first because they need to get somewhere. But generally, we kind of start with that ability piece as our first report, and then kind of go fill in the pieces, the achievement, and then behavior, and then get into the skills-based, and then any therapies they might be receiving. So that's kind of the order we go in. So kind of starting with that broad umbrella and then kind of getting more specific as you go. All right, so when we look at this data, I like to use this chart when I share my test results. I think teachers and parents seem to respond well to the visual rather than just hearing me say, well, they had a score of 91 on whatever test. This kind of puts it in perspective. You can easily pick out strengths and needs visually. So since I give both the ability and the achievement testing, I have them both on the same chart here. So let's start with that intelligence test. You know, you just all responded to, you know, why is it important that you know about these intelligence tests? And you guys came up with great ideas. It helps us know their learning style. It helps with those strengths and weaknesses. It helps us know like what level are they functioning at to help us teach the student, but also develop that IEP and accommodations. So when we look at this, I give the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. Probably more often you'll probably see the WISC being given. Anyway, this particular test divides that learning styles into verbal tasks and nonverbal tasks. So right away, visually, you can see this student is what kind of learner?
Nonverbal.
Yep, nonverbal. So they're gonna like those visuals. All these tasks that they're given in this nonverbal section have a picture to look at or items to manipulate. Whereas in the verbal tasks, you kind of take away a lot of those visuals and hands-on, and it's more they just have to listen to what they're being asked and give a more verbalized answer back. So right away we know this student, definitely there's a big gap between their nonverbal abilities and verbal abilities. So they're going to be that hands-on visual learner. In this particular test, I would say that's probably going to be a big enough gap that we're going to use that nonverbal IQ score. It looks like about 112, 13, instead of the full scale score, because it's, that big of a difference. So when we're looking at discrepancy, we're going to use this score, which is going to, put us over here where this arrow is that's the discrepancy score. So you'd use that chart, or use that chart that's part of that, I believe it's in the eligibility manual. That tells you if the IQ is 113, then the regression score is, this looks like, 70 or 65 or something. So, and I'm not sure that was moved because I think that would be higher. So then we look here at this particular student was given part of the Wyatt for the listening comprehension and oral expression, along with the Terra, Tima, and Tool. So a preschool age student. And you can see there, how are they performing in relation to their ability, would you say? Is it about the same range as their IQ, or are they working below, above?
Just below the full scale, but if you're working with nonverbal, then
right.
I don't know if that's a whole 1.5, but
yeah. What about this listening comprehension score?
makes sense.
Why?
Just because of that social skills and adaptability from the evidence on the Connors or whatever that one was.
Right, yep. And then remember this verbal was so much lower. So to maintain your attention and listen,
yeah, okay, yep.
and comprehend that language. But it's kind of surprising to see the oral expression is a bit higher. So they have pretty good language skills, but maybe it's more of an attention problem, getting in the way, something like that. So, all right, I'm going to show another one. Okay, so what do you notice about this one now? A little different than the first one we looked at. What do you notice right away visually?
The listening comprehension is really high compared to the nonverbal IQ.
Yeah. So this student might, gain a lot of information from listening to the instruction.
Strengths in math versus reading.
Mm-hmm. You see a big split between verbal and nonverbal in the IQ here. So it looks like verbals maybe like 81 and nonverbals maybe 89. So they're both kind of in the 80s. So we say, yeah, that's not a big gap. So in this case, we would kind of look at that full scale score, which is going to be the average of the two together. You can see it's about an 83 or so. What are your impressions of a student that maybe has an IQ of 83? In that low average range. Does learning come easily to them? No. These are your kids that kind of fall in that nebulous area when it comes to looking at specific learning disability, because their IQ and their academics are kind of at the same level. You can see some of these, you know, are a little higher, but to have that gap, one of these scores would have to fall below that blue arrow. So these are the toughest kids when we work with that discrepancy model. They would really probably benefit if we were making those determinations using the RTI model, because obviously, you know, something's not quite working. But these are also sometimes, if they have a hard work ethic, these are the kids that really can do well, but they have to really work hard at it and maybe need more time to learn new concepts.
So you're saying, like, in this situation that the student may have to work hard and may kind of struggle but wouldn't be eligible for services? Is that what you're saying?
Right. They wouldn't be eligible under specific learning disability, because one of these scores would have to fall below that arrow to show that gap. So, so here's where we'd have to look at other data, you know, where we're looking at, you know, do they have ADHD, and is that coming out in that behavior data? You know, you wouldn't qualify under cognitive disability because we know that has to be a 70 or below for the ability. But we could, you know, look at that behavior data would be another option. But yeah, these are the kids that break my heart because they need help, but they don't qualify. Any other questions on this one? All right. All right. How about this profile? So this is going to be, this is in the Wyatt. So it's going to be a student that's 16 or older. What can we say about the ability of this student?
Slow.
Yep. See that full scale falls at like 53 maybe. Can you pick out any strengths within there? Looks like this verbal comprehension is the highest score. So that's going to involve things such as defining words and comparing two words, how they're alike. So good understanding of that, you know, vocabulary and language. You can see when we come over to the achievement part, you know, that reading comprehension's a little stronger and listening comprehension. You know, both things that require a lot of language. So that strength comes out in academics. The perceptual reasoning index is a little bit lower, and that is for those visual things, manipulating shapes, you know, finding pieces that fit together, looking at 3D blocks. You can see processing speed's pretty low. So they're going to be much slower at tasks, those paper pencil types of tasks, need more time to learn new things. How do their academics compare to the ability? See, everything kind of falls in this borderline to extremely low range. So when we have a student that has that pretty low ability in that extremely low range, we're going to see it what we call a pretty flat profile. Everything's kind of right in that same area. So this would be a student likely qualifying under cognitive disability, could be a student with autism. So you can kind of see where it's much more flat than the other two examples we had. And low all across the board. So, you know, we look at eligibility criteria for cognitive disability. The IQ has to be below 70, and then the academics need to be below average. Meet those criteria. Then the third piece is looking at adaptive behavior. All right, here's another one. This is a pretty classic example. Don't get to see these very often, I feel. What can you tell me about this student? We have a verbal IQ, sorry Terry, I'm not explaining very well to you. Verbal IQ of about 105, nonverbal 104, full scale 104. Then we have a reading comprehension score of probably 105, math calculation 89, math reasoning 89, and written expression about 81. Discrepancy score is about 83. Let's start with the ability. What do you know about this student's ability level?
Average ability and struggles with written expression. So could that be a specific learning disability?
Does written expression fall below the arrow?
Yes.
Yes. So that represents that gap. So this student would have all the information here to support a specific learning disability in written expression. So the question I get asked a lot is, okay, you know, this student has a discrepancy in written expression, but we still have lots of concerns in that area of math. Can we qualify them in the area of math? So my answer to that question is usually you need to do what your district normally does. Some districts are pretty stuck to the criteria. Written expression would be the only area that qualifies. Other districts are a little more lenient. They may say, for sure written expression, but if you can show me in your skill-based data that math is a struggle, you can go ahead and serve them. So like written expression was your ticket into special ed, and we can help you with this area too. So I'd say most districts are kind of stick to the rules. But
Yeah, because that's not meeting all three prongs then.
right.
So is that some places just don't go by that?
I guess so.
Okay.
And coming from Sioux Falls, that's probably
Yeah.
strange to hear. When some smaller districts maybe kind of do their own thing until they're told they can't.
Right.
All right. Okay, this is, let's see. We kind of talked about I might skip ahead to our next part. Okay, let me switch screens here. Any questions from that piece or things you're wondering about? Oh. Gotta find it. There we go. Okay. All right. So now we're going to look at like a whole case and all their data from, you know, kind of how we were looking at those charts, kind of putting it all together and deciding which category a person would be eligible in. I should have had you make sure you have that eligibility manual with you, but we'll kind of go with it here. All right, so here's case number 1. From the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale, this student had a verbal IQ of 102, so average range, nonverbal IQ of 74, which would be in that low range, with a full scale of 88 in that low average range. So in this case, the regression scores, so on the achievement, they need a score of 83 or below to have that specific learning disability. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing there was enough split here where we used the 102 as the IQ, making that 1.5 standard deviations and 83. All right, so that's our information there. When we look at that nonverbal, like the different subtests that make that up, you can see a lot of them were lower, with that quantitative reasoning being kind of a strength in the, so working with numbers was a strength in that nonverbal area. But then you look, compare that to the verbal area, everything's more consistent, falling in that average range as far as all those types of thinking and problem solving. Okay, so now remember that regression score is 83. You can find that score on the chart that's included in that eligibility manual under the specific learning disability section. So I'd look under 102, and then straight across would be the 83. That's how we find that. So now here, which areas, if any, would there be a discrepancy? Let me get this. I have a basic reading score of a 91. This is the Wyatt, by the way. And I have a reading comprehension score of 84. Oral reading fluency was a 92. Numerical operations was a 77. Math problem solving was 84. Written expression, 81. Listening comprehension, 84. And oral expression, 96. Did you hear any below 83?
Math and written expression.
Math and written expression.
Yep, math calculation is numerical operations. So you'll notice in this particular test, you'll want to look at the asterisks. The asterisks are the areas that they can qualify for SLD. So for basic reading, I need that composite score instead of just one or the other of these. But when it comes to, we have a composite for reading comprehension and fluency, but we need to separate those out. So I'm going to look at the reading comprehension score by itself, and then the fluency score by itself. Same thing for math. It's broken down into the two areas. Written expression has a lot of areas that feed into that composite score. Same with listening comprehension and oral expression. Okay. So, using that data, we know this student would qualify or be eligible for services in the category of specific learning disability for written expression and math calculation. And then we also learned with that higher verbal score, they're going to be the student, not so much visual, but they need to hear it or tell you about it. Might be easier than seeing it all the time. Okay, here's case number 2. But before I go on, I should ask if you have questions. Good? All right. Case number 2, I have an IQ score, full scale score of 44. So the verbal was 49, nonverbal was 43. So total score of 44. Now, if you were to go to the regression chart and look for an IQ of 44, it won't be on there because the part of specific learning disability is they have to have, you know, kind of that average, low average, high average IQ. That has to kind of be in that range to qualify for specific learning disability. When we get, I think the chart goes down to 74, maybe 76. So we're well below that. So we know we're kind of looking at that maybe cognitive disability area. All right, so now we have our Wyatt information, and we would guess with an IQ of 44, where are these scores going to fall? And in that same range? Okay, so we have a basic reading of 54, math calculation 40, math problem solving 40, written expression 46. So does that match that chart we saw before? Is it kind of all in that same level?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, this one also has some behavior data with it. So let's take a look at that. Let's go. All right, so we're looking for, you know, stars, not seeing a lot of stars. Hyperactivity, more of a problem at home, just one school setting, so not seeing a big match there. When it comes to attention problems, yep, there's a concern, but it's not at that significant level with 3 stars across the board. Aggression, just mild at home, no conduct problems, no anxiety, no depression, no somatization or complaints of minor aches and pains, stomach ache, headache. Learning problems, a concern at school, which probably isn't a big surprise. So atypicality would be odd or immature types of behaviors. We see that as a significant across the board. Withdrawal being significant in 2 out of the 3. This one's close. 70 is kind of the switching point. Now adaptive skills, some social skills in a bigger setting, group setting at school. Leadership, doesn't like to be in those groups. Study skills, a mild problem. Another big area is that functional communication, being able to communicate their needs. So let's see. Oh, and then we have an adaptive behavior scale. Now we use adaptive behavior when we're looking at cognitive disability, when we're looking at autism spectrum disorder. I think vision impairment needs an adaptive behavior. I might be missing a couple, but I know for sure those 3 categories, you need to complete an adaptive behavior scale, which is going to look at some of those communication skills, social skills, how they get around their environments. And a lot of times you'll see that this adaptive behavior score will closely match that ability score. And in this student's case, we look at that general adaptive composite at the end here. So a total score of 57. So that's going to be in that very low range, just like the ability was. So, so this student has, you know, the IQ below 70, has those below average achievement scores, and the below average adaptive behavior scale. So they've met the 3 criteria for cognitive disability. My other question, looking at this behavior data, sometimes with atypicality, you know, are we looking at autism or are we just looking at a cognitive disability? So we can't really tell from here. There must not have been an autism screening done or testing. Have you found that, and I don't know if I put it on the site or not, There's a quick reference guide. So when you're going to start an evaluation and you kind of have an idea what categories you're looking at, and then it tells you exactly each thing that you have to include in the evaluation. Ability, achievement, adaptive behavior. It's kind of a little checklist. Have you guys used that or seen that? I'll have to check if I put it, I'll check and see if I put it on the resource for week 6. I'll stick it on there if it's not on there. I use it all the time to solve questions, so it's a handy tool. Okay, let's do one more case. All right, so case number 3. Your ability scores are verbal IQ 88, low average range. Nonverbal IQ is 96 in the average range, and then makes our full scale score in the average range at 92. Don't see a big gap between verbal and nonverbal here, so we're going to go with that full scale score of 92. And let's look at our regression score now is 77. And with the Wyatt, we have basic reading an 86, reading comprehension 97, oral reading fluency 96, math calculation 96, math problem solving 78, written expression 78, listening comprehension 90, oral expression 85. So needed 77 and we had 2 78s. That's what you hate to see. So close. See what else we got here. All right, so we have some behavior data to add to that. So looking at that first screen, what do you notice about behavior for the student?
Aggression and conduct problems are both.
All high across all raters. Yep. Always kind of like quick look at this hyperactivity, attention, you know. I'm wondering if this is the same data we already looked at in the last one. I think it is. Because depression again is high. Atypicality at school. And then the adaptive difficulties. So definitely kind of behavior in here affecting. Then this particular student also had an autism rating scale completed by the parent and the teacher. And the total score, we look at the total score at the bottom. And so in the school environment, there you see a high likelihood of characteristics of autism. So kind of the higher the score, the more matches of those characteristics. And the parent's kind of in that mild range at 63. We use this as kind of a screening tool at the Corn Belt. And then we contract out the autism testing to Lifescape. So, you know, this would kind of be a decision point for the team, you know. Do we think we could qualify this student under a behavior category? You know, we'd have to kind of make that determination. Is it more of those outward behaviors, or are we seeing that depression really having an effect on them? We could look at that category of emotional disturbance. If it was a reevaluation and they were previously categorized under other health impairment for ADHD, I would still go with that because there's still some concern. And maybe look at those even with, let me say that again. So even with accommodations and things put in place, they're still showing difficulty across the board, but it's not at that significant level across all ratings. I would still do that as a reeval. But if we're looking at that first initial qualification under OHI, I would say we need to have that high score across the board in either hyperactivity, attention problems, or both for that initial evaluation. So anyway, so then, you know, they can decide if they want to go look further into that area of autism, which might be an okay idea when we looked at that atypicality score, some of that withdrawal and social skills, and had that adaptive behavior difficulty too. So that's kind of, you know, as a team looking at all that data and putting it together. You know, we were just kind of talking eligibility here, and that's just looking at the score. Does the score meet the cut or doesn't it? Do you have each piece of that eligibility marked on those forms? But of course, you know, we've been talking about looking at that error analysis and looking deeper into the data to, you know, make those goals. But for eligibility purposes, we're mostly just looking at those numbers. And then there's also always the option to override your decision. That's tough to do because you have to say why your data that you've collected during your assessments was not true. So I always find it kind of tricky to override the decision, but sometimes we do because the student needs help. So I hope that gives you a little taste, if you haven't been part of those eligibility decisions, on what it's kind of like to put it all together. Kind of fast, maybe kind of overwhelming if you're not used to sitting in those meetings. So if you have questions, if something comes up later and you have questions, please let me know. So anything else? No? All right. Well, it's sure been great to meet all of you and work with you these last 6 weeks. Don't get to know you really well, but through your writing, I feel like I kind of get to know you a little bit. And ran into Erin at Taekwondo the other day. Didn't even know it. So. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll call it a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you next week.
All righty. Drive safe, Terry.
Bye.